The Ashport Archives, Book 1, Search for the Phoenix, by Stephanie A. Gillis. Read for you, unfortunately, by the author. I apologize for my terrible voice acting, but enjoy!
Prologue. When you're young, children like to think about what they want to be when they grow up. Firefighters, pop stars, presidents, even those special few that really wanted to be dinosaurs. It didn't matter what it was, because when you're a kid, everyone wants you to follow your dreams, no matter how strange they may seem. It's as the children grow older that the dreams change for better or worse, and only a rare few make those childhood dreams actually come true. Yes, even the dinosaur. She's really great at birthday parties. However, this story doesn't have as happy an ending as it does for the dinosaur girl. This story isn't about a girl getting her childhood dream job. This is the story about how the job found the girl, whether she wanted it or not. The job, however, already had an occupant. Unfortunately, he wouldn't have the job for long. Waite Connolly had held this position for over 30 years, and his job was one of the most important in the world. He was the conservator of the Ashport Conservatory in Colorado. A position that sounds like it's filled with cataloging, files, and saving the lives of endangered birds. While there is a lot of cataloging, and the bit about filing happens quite often as well, the endangered birds he handles are more along the lines of vampires, werewolves, and fairies. His job is to monitor the populations of supernatural creatures in the area, ensure the safety of humans, and defend that territory either by creating treaties and providing assistance, or resorting to a more permanent line of defense. The life of a conservator is certainly not for the faint of heart. It is a life of solitude, loneliness, and brutality. Currently, his job had taken him into the brutality side of conflicts. Even worse, that brutality was being inflicted upon him as he sat tied to a chair, bruised, bleeding, and trembling in the utmost fear for his life as his tormentor took another dull needle and inserted it under the fingernail of his right pinky. He would scream, but at this point he was so numb from the pain of days of ongoing torture that it all blended together in a constant stream of agony. If only he hadn't left the safety of the conservatory in an attempt to do further reconnaissance on an influx of empiric residency, he wouldn't have walked directly into a trap. The needle was slowly extracted from his finger by the vampire who held him captive. He was tall, with slicked-back dark hair, and despite being the undead, you could see he once must have been of olive-toned skin. His eyes were bright red and hungry for the blood that dripped from Waite's fingertips, though the restraint he'd had from having a taste or two was wavering. He was very well dressed in a sleek, expensive suit that miraculously had no blood on it at all, contrary to his victim, who was soaked in it. "My dear Mr. Connolly, I don't know how much longer I can take this." The vampire clapped a hand on his shoulder, like a father giving a stern talk to his son. "Well, I go on for eternity," he chuckled. "Being immortal does have its benefits. You, on the other hand, well, you're just so fragile and easily mangled." He clicked his tongue in disappointment, as though it was Waite's fault for being human. Waite's lips trembled as he tried to speak through the pain of his bruised jaws. "I don't have the information you want," Waite whispered with such exhaustion breathing out from his mouth. He would surely fall into unconsciousness again soon if this continued. He'd already gone under twice. Once more, and he was afraid his captor would just end him out of boredom. "Oh, but you do." He crouched down in front of Waite. "I know you do." Waite flinched and inhaled sharply as the vampire grabbed his bloody chin. The vampire wiped some of the blood off and licked it, unable to contain himself any longer. "Your blood. It just doesn't taste like other blood. What do you eat? Are there drugs in this? Vitamins, perhaps?" He chuckled while taking another sampling as he stood back up. "You won't find it. You'll never find it. I'll never tell you." Waite spat blood in the vampire's eye. Despite his exhaustion, his resolve was unwavering. The vampire slowly walked around him, keeping one threatening hand on the back of Waite's neck. "That's all right. I know you have the information in that conservatory of yours. I will just use your dead, lifeless corpse to get in, and get exactly what I want." Waite's body shook in fear. Conservatories are supposed to be one of the most protected places a person could go, and his conservatory was one of the oldest and most secluded. He could not allow it to be tainted by this monster. "Please," Waite begged. "Please don't. You can stop that from happening, you know." He kneeled back down, holding Waite's head as it tried to stay upright. "You could tell me where the phoenix is, and then I'll make it all better." Waite struggled under the pain to speak. "What's that? I can't hear you." He put a hand on Waite's shoulder. "Speak louder!" He pulled Waite's arm so hard that a loud popping noise echoed in the room as his shoulder dislocated. Waite cried out in agony. Breathing sharply and quickly, he mustered the strength to shout at the vampire. "No, I won't tell you!" The vampire sighed with annoyed disappointment, rolled his eyes, and grabbed Waite's head. In one swift movement, he broke his neck and tossed his body aside. "Well, fine. Be that way." The vampire lightly wiped his hands together, dusting off any remnants of the conservator. "Reginald!" he called out, and the wooden door swung open behind him, permitting another vampire to walk through. He didn't look as slick as his master, with disheveled blonde hair, loose jeans, and a ruthless demeanor on his face. "Doc Navarre," Reginald answered and stood at attention, waiting for his orders. "Take this to the car. We're heading out." Doc Navarre glided towards the door while gesturing to Waite's body like an old suitcase. Reginald moved and casually slung the corpse over his shoulder as though he was nothing more than a pillow. He followed Doc Navarre down the hallway when they both froze in their steps, sniffing at the air. "Fire?" Reginald looked to his master in confusion. Not a split second before, the front door burst open, full of flames. A dark shadow stood in the door, holding large fireballs in his hands. Doc Navarre pushed Reginald in front of him as a shield. "Go!" Chapter 1. An Unfortunate Phone Call. Go! A group of 5 Japanese middle school students quickly began practicing their English speeches as best they could before they would individually present them to their speech coach, Levin Connolly. Levin had been a part-time English language teacher in Nagoya for the past 2 years while attending classes at Nagoya International University, much to the disapproval of pretty much everyone she knew back home. Many students often came to the university for private speech lessons to prepare them for examinations, speech contests, or the rare few that came just because they liked chatting in English. This particular group of students was preparing for the interview portion of their high school entrance exam. Levin sat down at the desk waiting for the timer to go off in a few minutes when one by one they would perform their speech portion of the interview and she would give each of them notes on how to improve. Whether that be pronunciation, intonation, or just trying to train them not to sound like a depressed robot whose parents have forced them to do this. Sitting next to her was Jun Watanabe, her teaching partner who coincidentally was her Japanese tutor outside of this classroom, and a good friend. He was pretty much the closest friend Levin had in Japan. They often ate lunch or dinner and would occasionally see a movie or go to an event on campus together. In the classroom, June helped supervise the students and coach them on the Japanese side of the interview, help with their registration, and any translation needs necessary between Levin and the students. During this time when the students practiced by themselves, her thoughts normally drifted to what errands she needed to run after school or what she would study at the library later, but something was different today. Today, she felt an anxiety that hummed all over her skin in waves of heat and cold. It made her skin feel tight around her hands, that made them feel as though if she needed to grab something, she doubted her ability to grasp even a pencil. It was that same feeling you get when you stand at the top of a skyscraper and look down. That loss of control and fear of falling to your death. It made her stomach churn, but made her analytical side try to reason it away. The night before, she had woken up to an intense nightmare involving a pack of wolves, a cave, and a lot of blood loss. Levin hardly remembered dreams, but for some reason, this dream would not leave her alone, like one line of a song on repeat in her head. Her entire body felt nauseated no matter how many antacids she took. She was barely able to keep down the bento she bought for lunch earlier, and it was one of her favorites, miso katsu. All she could think about now were ways to try and relieve her anxiety as soon as the day was out. She had decided that a long session of karaoke or spending all the money in her wallet on random stuff at the secondhand shop were her best options. Possibly both. The strange thing was, through all the stress from the dreams, the one thing she really felt like she needed to do today was call her parents, something Levin hadn't done since she left for Japan in the first place. After all, they hadn't been on the best of terms when she had made the decision to leave, not only the country, but the family. As a child, Levin had a rather unorthodox upbringing. Her parents were well respected in their field of science, but not by the other sciences. Levin's parents had brought her up under the belief that monsters like demons and ghosts were real. They would rattle on and on about spirits entering the human plane too often, vampires nesting nearby, or demons infiltrating society. Levin never bought it. People saw spirits because of tricks of light and an influence of scary movies. Vampires weren't nesting, they were just goths who hadn't grown out of the phase in high school. Demons didn't infiltrate society, sometimes there were just awful people who do awful things. She always had a very skeptical mind, and without physical proof, she couldn't believe something existed. It's why Halloweens were never fun, because no matter how hard her parents would try to prove that paranormal creatures existed, she would never believe them. Though, that never stopped her from wanting the candy. They always seemed disappointed in Levin. Her father sometimes would shout at her because she was supposed to understand. She was supposed to know it already. She was supposed to be this great achievement in their lives, but she just wasn't amounting to it. They wanted her to wake up and see the world around her, but for Levin, she wanted them to wake up and smell the reality. So, when she decided to go to a college in another country, far away from them, they were pretty upset. Even more so when they heard she wasn't going to major in metaphysics, occult sciences, or even folklore and mythology. Sure, because being mocked by the scientific community is a legacy one really wants to pass down through generations. They had wanted to send her to some weird school halfway across the country, specifically for students of the paranormal. They had even sent in an application for her without telling her, which only solidified her decision to leave. They refused to pay for anything, thinking that would deter her, but Levin had been saving money from her after-school job at the sandwich shop. She worked hard in school to get scholarships to help pay for tuition. She was going to go without their help. One night she'd heard her parents arguing about their abominable daughter and were going to concoct a potion or make a spell to keep her there. That's when she knew she couldn't wait another second. She left the house that night while they figured out whatever means of drugging her they could. She stayed with one of her lesser-known friends, Jessica, who owed her a favor anyway until the flight. Then, she was gone. She swore that one day she was going to get a call that her parents had finally snapped and would wind up in an asylum, muttering on about fairies in the bars and werewolves running rampant in the streets. The one thing Levin did regret was leaving her two best friends, Nigel and Sadie. They tried to keep in contact at first, but after about half a year from her departure, they just stopped talking altogether, never responding to her emails or replying to her letters. Strangely, both of their profile pages were taken down. She even sent them care packages that just got sent right back to her apartment. So, she stopped trying to reach them and focused on her new and seemingly permanent life in Japan. It was a good life. She got paid decently and worked hard at school. She got along with her professors and made a few friends, especially in June. He'd been very welcoming of her since day one. He helped her get a cell phone, and any time she got a piece of mail she didn't understand, he was always ready to help translate. Every weekend or so, they went out to dinner together, or to exhibits and special shows at the International Center in the city. She felt she was really lucky to have made such a good friend so quickly. It helped take the pain away from what she had lost. Levin snapped out of her thoughts as the timer went off. She jumped up with June to escort the first student into the practice interview room. She pushed the thoughts of her dreams away while she helped each student improve their speeches and answers to the interview questions. It was easy to do that until after the study session, when June left to go to one of his classes and Levin went to the library to practice her kanji. Kanji had always been Levin's weakest point. Reading it was a lot easier than writing it because she was left-handed and had messy handwriting even in English. She could never remember when certain strokes were supposed to go upwards or downwards, so she would drill it into her hand over and over again in her notebooks until muscle memory took over for her. She had been concentrating on the kanji for a while when her eyes attempted REM while still open. She tried to focus on the kanji, but it kept moving and reforming into a symbol she didn't recognize, but at the same time felt familiar. She saw an eye with a pyramid pupil and a six-sided star encased around it. She recalled something similar in her parents' bedroom, but it wasn't a solid enough memory for her to grasp. She shook her head, thinking exhaustion was getting to her, as a cold chill tickled its way up her spine. She looked up, looking for the source of the draft, but she'd sat in the back corner of the library as she always did, and the windows appeared to all be shut. Besides, it was October. It didn't get cold in Nagoya until late November at the earliest. Deciding to ignore the phantom draft, she continued with her kanji. Levin's head shot up as she heard a man's voice call out to her even though no one was in this section of the library. She felt as though the wolves from her dreams had somehow gotten inside and were flanking her through the bookshelves. Her eyes were drawn to the window nearby, and she swore she saw a person looking in, but when the moonlight cast its glow, it appeared to just be a crow flying by. Besides, she was on the 3rd floor. No one could be standing out there. That would be impossible. Though the notion of it tugged at Levin's mind and drew her closer to the window. Ignoring her cautious mind, slowly she stood up from the table and quietly stepped over to the glass. But just as her eyes began to focus on the outside, she felt a tap on her shoulder, making her body jolt probably 10 feet in the air and belt out a brief high C. She let out a relieved sigh and pressed a hand to her chest to calm her racing heart when she realized the culprit was June. "Hey, did I scare you?" He laughed with a mischievous smirk on his face. "Should I have made a loud noise, trumpeted my arrival?" "No," she defended. "I was just thinking, and you surprised me. What's up?" "Oh, I was just thinking of going to Hamazushi for dinner. Would you like to join me?" He looked at her a little bashfully as he asked. Kappamaki and cheesy shrimp? Yes, please." Levin turned back to the table to start packing up her books while forcing the weird thoughts she had been having out of her mind. "Great," he smiled brightly. He went to say something more when her phone started violently vibrating on the table. She looked at the screen to see who it was, but it was a number she was unfamiliar with. Usually when this happened, it was someone from the college, a wrong number, or the police telling her they found something she hadn't realized she had lost. "Moshi moshi, Levin desu." She answered, thinking a Japanese person would be on the other line. "Is this Levin Connolly?" the deep voice of an American man asked. "Yes? Who am I speaking to?" "My name is Randall Richmond III. I'm an estate lawyer. I am contacting you on behalf of your uncle, Waite Connolly. I'm terribly sorry to tell you this, but your uncle has passed away." For a moment, Levin couldn't react. The words didn't feel like words to her when she heard them. They felt more like a howl on the wind where you're not sure if it really was the wind or something more ominous. Too many questions started popping up in her brain that they left her mouth before she had actually finished processing the information. "Excuse me? When? How?" Levin's words felt scrambled in her mouth. She didn't know what to say or what to do in this situation. 3 days ago, he sadly perished in a forest fire," Randall Richmond III said in a rather straightforward, all-business tone. Oh my God. Levin sat down, holding her head. She had never been close with her uncle, having only met him a few times in her childhood. Her father had never gotten along with his brother all that much. Thinking of her father made her wonder if they knew. If they did, why didn't they tell her? Sure, they hadn't been on speaking terms in a couple of years, but you would think with something like this they would have said something. Sent an email or written a card? Then again, this was her parents she was talking about. They'd barely told her anything about their family even when she was under their roof. "Have you contacted the rest of the family?" "No, it states in his will that in the event of his passing, his entire estate would go directly to you. No other relation is mentioned." "Me? Really?" That seemed even more unbelievable. If you thought Levin's relationship with her parents was rocky, well, there wasn't even a foundation to build an unstable one with her uncle. "Yes, I hate to be the one to break this news to you, but there is a lot of paperwork to handle. How soon do you think you'd be able to come?" The phone almost slipped out of her hand, thinking of what he was suggesting. Go home? Home? To America. To Colorado. The place she so desperately had escaped. That didn't seem like a plausible idea in the slightest. "Isn't there a way we could do this electronically, maybe through a video call or some PDF files?" Even when she said it, she knew how stupid the suggestion sounded. "I'm afraid not. There's a lot of paperwork that needs notarization and—" "I understand. I'll figure something out." Levin held her head in her hand with a sigh after taking down his information and hanging up the phone. For a moment, her entire body was still as she let the news of her uncle's death wash over her. The vibrating anxiety she had felt all day was now replaced by a numbing misery. She had barely known him. In the entire span of her life, she had only met him 3 times. He was her father's older brother, and upon her grandparents' death before she was born, he had inherited their old house and much of their money. He never invited them over, and had come to them on those 3 visits. The first visit was at her 5th birthday party. He hadn't come for the party, though. He didn't even seem to know she existed, let alone that it was her birthday. He came to talk to her father in private about one of the crazy monsters they thought were real. She had thought he wasn't as bad as her parents were. He may not have come prepared for a birthday, but he did give her a pack of gum he had just bought. He hadn't even opened it. Well, it wasn't exactly gum. It was nicotine addiction gum, but still, those are expensive, and even 5-year-old Levin understood that, especially after her parents took them away from her. The second time he visited was at her first day of middle school. She wasn't sure why he had come in the first place, but her parents weren't happy to see him. She ended up getting to school 3 hours late because he wouldn't leave until he had finished speaking to her dad, who was supposed to take her to class. She remembered sitting on the steps of their house while her father and uncle spoke in angry tones in the study. She couldn't hear them clearly, but she caught a few words here and there. It sounded like they were arguing about something in their family tree, but the memory was so faded now it could have been something completely different. The final time was the strangest for Levin. He had shown up at her senior prom. She had gone outside to get some air when she found him surveying the prom dressed in ratty, wine-stained clothing, stumbling around like an idiot. That was when she realized her uncle was probably a creeping pervert checking out the teenage girls, and she wanted nothing more to do with him. That's why she found her status of heiress to his estate so mind-boggling. The last time they spoke, she'd yelled at him in the courtyard of the hotel the dance was being held. He didn't argue with her. He just let her have it at him. She remembered calling him a drunken peeping Tom in a bush. Levin had never been that proficient at name-calling. "Levin?" June interrupted her train of thought, almost causing her to fall out of her seat. "Is everything okay?" He slowly sat down next to her with concern riddling his face. He looked like he wanted to touch her, to give her a comforting squeeze in her hand, but had restrained himself. "Yeah. No, it's not. I have to go home." She hadn't looked at him. Her eyes would not tear away at the paper she had written Mr. Richmond III's number on. "Are you feeling all right? Do you need me to take you to the doctor?" He pulled out his phone, ready to call for an appointment. "No, home, America." She stood up, holding her head as she tried to think about everything that she needed to do. Her thoughts scrambled around trying to form a comprehensive list, but there were too many different things and emotions making them impossible to organize. "America? Why? What happened?" "Oh, my uncle died." She started babbling while picking up her purse and putting her belongings in it, only to drop it all, sending pencils and books scattering in a cluttered mess onto the floor. She and June kneeled down while trying to stuff them back in her bag. "I need to go. I need to get a plane ticket. I have to pack. I need one of those weird pillow things for my neck." Okay, I'll help you. You go home and pack. I'll help handle your leave with the school, and I'll come by later to check in with you." "Oh, no, you don't have to do that." She swung the bag around her shoulder. "Levin, go home. I'll see you in a few hours, okay?" He turned her out of the library and pushed her out, forcing her to leave the building and let him handle the rest. She was thankful for June. Normally, she probably would have to go to the international office and fill out tons of paperwork to explain the situation, but June, while still a student, basically worked there and was a blessing to have when things like this came up. When Levin arrived in her small apartment, she pulled out her large purple suitcase, put it on her bed, and opened it up. She stared blankly at the tan lining for a good 10 minutes while her body caught up with the time that had passed since the news. Not going home wasn't an option, as her uncle's lawyer had made that very clear, but going home was something she never thought she would do. She had cut her ties to America for good, or at least she thought she had. Her parents never even tried to find her after she went to Japan. Levin assumed her friends were mad at her for her choices. They used to chat occasionally, but after a while, they just stopped. Levin thought that was the end of her connection to America, and then her stupid uncle had to go and ruin everything by making her his heir. Levin folded her arms in a huff. Selfish uncle. Stupid, selfish uncle who probably relapsed on smoking and started that forest fire himself. Levin sunk down to the floor, leaning over her bed. It wasn't right to blame the dead. It wasn't right to hate her uncle. After all, if he had made her his only heir, then that meant he had no one else, not even her father, to turn to. Even after everything she had said to him on their last encounter, she owed it to him to go back and settle his affairs and honor his memory. He was family, after all. So, if her parents were too stubborn to do it, she wasn't going to be. She opened her dresser drawer and stared into the underwear and sock drawer. How many would she need? She wasn't sure how long she would stay. She usually planned very detailed itineraries, but in this scenario, she was forced to simply grab an armful of each and dump them into the suitcase, and repeat for her other clothes. When she went to get her toiletries into a bag, she looked at her computer screen and saw that Skype was sitting open on her desktop. Setting her plastic bag of liquids down on the counter, she walked over to the computer and scrolled through her contacts list until she saw the ID of her mother. She clicked it twice, opening a chat box, and then eyed the green call button. Someone needed to tell them about Uncle Waite. Taking a deep breath, she hit the call button. She listened to that stupid and ridiculously annoying jingle as she waited for the other line to pick up, but instead it just went to the voicemail of her mother's cell phone, instructing her to leave a message after the tone. Hi, Mom. It's me. It's Levin. Levin rolled her eyes at herself in the mirror across from her on the wall, mocking her own stupidity. Listen, I'm going to be coming home for a little bit because Uncle Waite... She gulped. Uncle Waite passed away a few days ago, and he made me his heir, so I'll be back to take care of some of the paperwork. So I was thinking you and Dad and I might want to get together and, mourn or something. Suddenly her doorbell rang. See you soon, gotta go, bye. She quickly hung up the call and closed her laptop shut before heading to the door. June had already stepped into the entrance area and was taking off his shoes. Hi, how are you doing? He asked warily while adjusting the bags in his hands. I'm fine, thank you. You really didn't have to go through the trouble. No, I'm your tutor and international student advisor. It's my job to help you in a crisis. Here. He handed her a plastic bag. Inside, she found the neck pillow she had babbled on about at school. It's the memory foam kind, not the air-filled ones that leak. Sorry about the design. Pink Tiger was the only one left. He laughed awkwardly, brushing his fingers through the back of his hair. It's great. Thank you so much. She reached to him and gave him a quick side hug of appreciation before leading him further into her apartment. He was too generous and good. Levin felt very lucky to have him as a friend. Everything is taken care of at school. They just need you to fill out these. He pulled out a clear file folder from his briefcase. Just contact information and the time you'll be gone, the usual, he instructed. How long will you be gone? Well, I'm not sure. Hopefully no longer than a week or two. I've never dealt with this stuff, and I'm still looking into a ticket. Here, you pack, I'll get your ticket, he offered, turning to her computer. Levin went to argue, but he stopped her with a smile. No, I will do this. I will take you to the station, and when you come back, I will pick you up. No arguing. Start packing. He turned her around and opened her laptop to purchase a plane ticket online. Levin smiled as she continued putting her suitcase together. She was really lucky to have a student advisor like June. Other students don't always get so lucky. Sometimes the students they work with don't even speak that great of English, but June had spent many years studying in America, and he had perfected his accent to an almost scarily native tongue thanks to hours watching television shows. This also gave them plentiful topics to talk about during their first meeting. The foundation in their friendship was set thanks to many discussions about crime shows and bad reality TV. June was a particularly big fan of Big Brother. She was glad that she had June in her life in Nagoya. It was a big city, but it was very difficult to make friends with people that understood you on the same level they would at home. Sure, everyone in the school knew Levin's name and face, but that was one of the many things that came with studying abroad. Everyone was always nice to her, seemingly out of obligatory politeness. Finding people to just relax and hang out with to watch the latest comic book movie adaptation without a bad Japanese dub, well, that kind of friendship was rare to find. Thinking about their friendship made Levin wonder if she should call Nigel and Sadie about coming back. Several scenarios started playing in her mind. Each inevitably would end poorly. They hadn't spoken in years, so maybe they wouldn't pick up, which was fine. And then there was no confrontation, the best likely scenario. On the other hand, they could pick up and possibly want to catch up, and Levin would find the pair of them being 10 times better off without her in their lives, and reminding Levin how much of a terrible friend she had been. The third scenario she had thought of was them picking up, yelling at her to never try to contact them again, and possibly showing up at the airport and egging her in the face. It seemed a little far-fetched, but not totally out of the realm of Nigel's capabilities. Sadie, however, always had the sweetest disposition, and while Nigel may give her a little more crap about it, they never really could stay mad at each other for long. She decided she would call them once she got stateside. Then they could get together only at their convenience, and they wouldn't have to be obligated to make plans ahead to accommodate someone they probably didn't even want to see. With the help of many phone calls and June's Japanese magic, they managed to find her a flight for the next day with a bereavement fare. Early the next morning, June drove her to the Chubu Centrair International Airport in Nagoya, where she would board a flight to Detroit and then transfer to Denver. There, she would get a rental for her trip to Ashport. She promised to bring him back something in the form of edible goodies. June had a strange affinity for Pop-Tarts, and sadly Japan had not yet discovered the breakfast pastry, much to his dismay. Levin was exhausted by the time she reached her flight. She always felt gross while traveling, even though she had barely begun, but she hadn't slept much the night before, so her weariness was carrying over into her pores. The only thing that saved her from the oily feeling in her face was the facial tissue she hoarded while traveling. While waiting for her flight, she sat in one of the uncomfortable black leather chairs at her gate and looked around. The other gates around her were going to very different locations. There was one to Beijing, one to Manila, another to Guam, and the one in the corner was headed to Helsinki. How she'd much rather be boarding those flights than her own. She was tempted to jump on the one down the road to Honolulu. If she had to go back to America at all, she hoped it would at least be for a tropical vacation. The people sitting around her were a mixture of frequent flying businessmen and women, families who come to Japan on vacation with disgruntled teenagers who were too scared to try any real Japanese food, and travel junkies with plaid shirts and bags covered in love-and-peace hemp buttons who probably hadn't bathed since their last hostel visit. She thought about how many of them were actually happy to be going on an airplane, and how many of them dreaded it. Levin hated flying. No matter how many times people told her it was the safest way to travel, if something goes wrong and the plane crashes, there is pretty much guaranteed death. Guaranteed. If you get in a car accident, you have a better chance of survival. If you fall and trip on the sidewalk, you'd have an even better chance. Sure, you could die, but you have a way better chance of just receiving a bump on the head and a scrape to the knee. With airplanes, no. Entire body is fairly likely to get obliterated upon impact. Even if you magically survive the impact, a whole lot more could kill you, like a fire or sharks. Levin only liked her sharks on the television during the 1 week of the year everyone celebrated sharks, and that doesn't even happen in Japan. She had to stream it online. Yes, Levin would much rather be on the ground than flying tens of thousands of feet in the air with chewy Play-Doh food and drooling people on her shoulder for 13 hours. Despite her raging displeasure for flying, she boarded the plane when her zone was called. Thanks to June's many phone calls, she was able to get one of the emergency exit seats with more legroom, even though sitting next to one was a constant reminder of how the giant metal bird she was in the belly of could potentially end her life. She had heard recently about some guy who just started panicking on an airplane in the middle of the flight and tried to open the emergency exit. Looking at the two people seated next to her, she wondered if either of them had that certain freak-out potential. Next to her was a young man, newly into international relations business type with a million gadgets to turn off and stow, while the old woman in the aisle seat was stereotypically trying to finish knitting some booty socks for her grandchild. She let out a sigh of relief as she graded their potential to be fairly low on the scale. "Don't like flying?" the man next to her asked, noticing her sigh. "Not really a big fan, no." She shook her head and sucked air through her teeth. "Don't worry, I fly all the time, and all of my flights have been completely safe. Barely even any turbulence. I'm a good luck charm for that." He smirked at her, flashing his eyes seductively. Levin smiled, realizing his potential to freak out on an airplane was rock bottom, but his potential to be one of those perverted creepers was way up there. "I'm Chad Bronson. Rule of thumb, only douchebags introduce themselves like James Bond." "Levin." She shook his hand, which he held for far too long for her comfort. "That's an unusual but beautiful name. What does it mean?" He flashed a bright white smile at her. "You know, I'm not sure. I think my parents just made it up." He laughed superficially. Levin tried to smile through her annoyance. "So, where's your final destination? Transferring at Detroit?" "Yeah, Denver." "Oh, so am I. What part of Denver are you headed to? He leaned in closer, forcing Levin to become one with the window. Ashport. It's a bit north of Denver. No kidding. I'm headed there too. What a coincidence. Do you live there? No. Well, yeah, I used to. I live here in Japan now. It's my first time there. I'm doing a favor for my boss to collect on a business investment. Are you visiting family? Let me guess. Wedding? He winked at her, making her skin crawl. Funeral. Despite feeling sad about her uncle, she was rather pleased to wipe that far too bright smile off of his face. Oh, I'm so sorry. He reached over, giving her one of the most awkward hugs she had ever experienced, with his arm draped over the front of her body and his head leaning into her ear. I'm so sorry for your loss. Were you and the deceased very close? His tone changed to a phony concern that deepened his voice in a really strange and disturbing way. Actually, no. She wriggled out of his embrace. No, we haven't spoken in several years, in fact, but he left me his house and stuff, so I'm just going back to handle his affairs, get his house on the market, and then get back here. I see. Levin looked at him in confusion. She wasn't sure why she felt so alarmed by the way he had said it. They were two simple words that anyone would say in a normal conversation, but he made the words feel like she had just given him valuable information, almost like he had been trying to get the information out of her the entire time. Well, I hope everything goes smoothly for you. I've actually got a brother in the real estate business, so if you need any help selling the house... He whipped out a shiny gold business card case from his jacket pocket. Here's my card. Just give me a call. My personal cell is right there. He tapped it while flashing another blindingly white smile in her direction. Seriously, what dental whitening strips commercial did he pop out from? Thanks. She took it apprehensively and leaned down to her bag to put it away, completely unaware of the sudden flash of red in his eyes.
Hi, cuties! So, I hope you enjoyed that first chapter plus the prologue of my book, Search for the Phoenix, first book in the Ashport Archives. There are 4 books in the series. The audiobook is fully available on Audible. Woohoo! So you can go check it out and read the rest of Levin's story for yourself. I started writing the book in 2013. It came out in 2016. It's my debut, my little debut, baby. And I just wanted to share with you, I did work on the audiobook this year. I do intend to finish the rest of the books as audiobooks in the coming years. Hopefully BookTube will definitely be done in 2023, so look forward to that. And if you prefer, physical copies or ebooks, it's always been available that way. You can get them directly from me on my Ko-fi shop. You can get a signed copy, or you can get them from Amazon or other online retailers and all that jazz. And just for a little extra oomph to this video, even though it's super long, here is the trailer fully explaining more of what you'll find in the Ashport Archives. And I'm going to go now. I will see you tomorrow, cuties, for another day of Litmas. Bye.
I never wanted to return home, but when your estranged uncle leaves you his entire estate upon his untimely death, you don't really have a choice. It wouldn't be so bad if I at least still had some friends, but they hadn't spoken to me in years. Hey, it's Levin. I'm back. If you want to meet up and you don't loathe my existence. I really don't want to do this.
Let's get all the paperwork signed and get you out of the way.
Excuse me?
On your way. Back to Japan. It's what you want, right?
Will you stop? I'm here to help you. By dragging me into a coat check? Yeah, I believe that. Are you saying there is a whole system of government over mythical creatures?
I'm saying you're part of that government now that you own Ashport. There's magic in everyone. just a matter of finding where it's hiding.
No one is in control of your life except yourself.